I'm just so glad you are here with us right now because we are tackling something that I know almost every single person listening to this has experienced at least once.
Oh, absolutely. It's universally relatable.
Right. You have spent hours or maybe even years studying vocabulary. You have painstakingly mastered the grammar rules. You've done the flashcards. You've aced the written tests. And, you're feeling pretty good about your English skills.
You feel prepared, you feel ready on paper.
Exactly. But then you step out into the real world. A native speaker actually opens their mouth to ask you a simple question, and you completely, totally freeze.
Just a deer in the headlights.
Yes. Your mind goes entirely blank, your palms get a little sweaty, and the language just sounds like this impenetrable wall of noise. I actually vividly remember the first time I went to London, a barista looked at me and cheerfully asked, "What you up to?"
Oh no, the classic blended greeting.
Yeah, my brain just registered a single bizarre sound, "What you up to?" I just nodded and smiled, entirely panicked, hoping it wasn't a question about my coffee order.
Which is terrifying when you're just trying to get your morning caffeine.
Exactly. So if you are nodding your head right now, you are exactly who we are doing this deep dive for today. We have a fantastic, highly practical grounding source called the 10 Pillars of Natural English Listening Mastery. And our mission today is to rescue you from that textbook English and equip you with the tools to actually process the language in the fast-paced real world.
It is such a visceral, common experience. And honestly, the very first thing we need to do today is just validate that frustration you're feeling. If you have ever frozen up in a conversation like that barista moment, you need to know that it is completely normal.
It really is. People beat themselves up over it so much.
Sure, they do. And it is not a failure of your intelligence. It doesn't mean you're bad at languages. What is actually happening in your head is a cognitive bottleneck. Your brain is trying to do something incredibly complex in real time. What I appreciate so much about our source material today is that it bridges the gap between the pristine theoretical knowledge you already have on paper and the messy, unfiltered reality of how human beings actually communicate. We're looking at the practical steps to train your auditory cortex to handle that real-world speed.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with what our source calls the absolute number one mistake that learners make. This is tip 1 from the guide, and it requires a massive mindset shift. You have to let go of perfection. Specifically, you have to completely stop trying to understand and translate every single word.
Exactly. And there's a very specific cognitive science reason why this is so critical. It comes down to cognitive load theory. Your working memory, the part of your brain that holds and processes new information, is finite.
Right, it has a limit.
A very hard limit. When you try to translate word by word, sentence by sentence in your head, you are essentially maxing out your cognitive bandwidth. You hear the English word, you search your mental database for the translation in your native language, you process that meaning, and by the time you've done all that computational work for just one single noun, the speaker is already 3 sentences ahead.
They're onto a completely different topic.
Precisely. It simply slows the brain down too much for real-time conversation. The source gives us a brilliant golden rule here. Train your brain to catch the main idea because understanding just 70% is enough.
But wait, if I am intentionally letting go of perfection and just ignoring 30% of what someone says, aren't I risking a massive miscommunication? What if that missing 30% contains the actual core information I need? It feels incredibly counterintuitive to just let words slide by.
It does feel counterintuitive at first, I completely agree. But you have to trust your brain's capacity as an inference machine. The 30% you are missing usually consists of filler words, prepositions, or minor adjectives. Even if you miss a core noun, the surrounding context almost always bridges the gap.
Because you already have the gist of the sentence.
Right. Think about your native language. You don't consciously process every single syllable someone says in a noisy restaurant, right?
That's true. You just sort of grab the key words over the background noise.
Exactly. Your brain automatically fills in the blanks based on the context. When you stop obsessing over the words you missed, you free up your working memory to focus on the overall message. The source is very clear on this. If you miss a word, ignore it. Let it go. The rest of the context will naturally fill in the blanks as the conversation continues.
That makes a lot of sense. You're preserving your mental energy for the big picture. But letting go of that need to catch every single word requires a lot of grace for yourself. It takes mental discipline not to panic when you hear a word you don't know. And that actually connects directly to tip 10 from the guide, which is about patience. You aren't just memorizing a list of rules anymore. You are literally rewiring how your brain processes sound.
It is a profound neurological rewiring process. You are building new neural pathways. And as the source reminds us, progress in this kind of adaptation is never a straight line. I think it's very important for you, the listener, to keep this in mind. Some days you are going to feel like you understand absolutely everything, like you finally achieved fluency.
Those are the good days.
The best days. And then the very next day, you might listen to a different speaker or a different topic and feel completely lost again. That isn't regression. That is just the normal, messy process of your brain adapting to new acoustic signals. But the source gives us a very encouraging and specific time frame to hold on to. It notes that if you commit to these daily steps consistently for 3 months, you will see a huge, undeniable difference. The pattern recognition will start to become automatic.
3 months to rewire your brain's audio processing. That is a completely doable time frame. But that begs the question, if we are committing to 3 months, how exactly are we spending that time? The source introduces a great analogy for tip 2, comparing listening practice to going to the gym. And the absolute foundational rule here is that consistency beats intensity.
Yes, consistency is everything.
You do not need to lock yourself in your room for a grueling 3-hour study session on a Saturday afternoon. That is just going to lead to auditory fatigue and burnout. What you actually need is just 20 to 30 minutes of daily, highly focused practice. Small, consistent workouts every single day to keep those neural pathways active.
What's fascinating here is how we structure those small daily workouts to maximize neuroplasticity. You don't just walk into a fitness gym and immediately try to deadlift the heaviest weight on your very first day. You would injure yourself.
You'd be out for a week.
Exactly. You use the principle of progressive overload. The source applies this directly to language learning with tips 3 and 4. You have to build your listening muscles step by step. If you start your practice by diving into incredibly fast, slang-heavy movies or complex, fast-paced political debates, you are only going to overwhelm your cognitive load and frustrate yourself.
You're just setting yourself up to fail.
You are. The strategy is to deliberately begin with clear, slightly slower speakers. Think educational YouTube channels, specialized learning podcasts, or audiobooks with simpler vocabulary. You let your brain adapt to that manageable speed first. You let it find its footing. And only when that feels comfortable, when you are consistently hitting that 70% comprehension mark, do you slowly increase the difficulty.
Right, you have to build that solid foundation first. But the guide doesn't just tell us what to listen to, it tells us exactly how to listen. It gives us a highly specific 3-step repetition method for this daily workout. Because you don't just passively listen to a 3-minute piece of audio once and then throw it away. You squeeze every single drop of value out of it.
You really have to mine it for all it's worth.
Exactly. Here is the 3-step breakdown. First, you listen to the audio purely for the general meaning. You use that 70% rule we talked about. You just want the big picture. Then, you listen to that exact same audio a second time. But now your brain already knows the context, so you focus on the details. You start picking up those finer points, the specific nouns or verbs you missed the first time.
Your brain is primed for it.
Yes. And finally, the third time you listen, you completely shift your focus. You aren't even focused on the meaning of the words anymore. You are strictly listening to notice the pronunciation, the rhythm, and the intonation of the speaker. Every single replay lowers the cognitive load and makes the audio clearer to your brain.
That repetition is exactly what builds rapid recognition. But there is a crucial caveat here, which brings us to tip 8 from the source, which is the fundamental difference between passive and active listening. This is where so many intelligent language learners hit a plateau. You have to stop treating English like a background soundtrack to your life.
Oh, this is a big one.
Massive. Having an English podcast playing softly in the background while you are cooking dinner, scrolling on your phone, or driving is passive listening. It has its place for general immersion, absolutely, but it will not give you the rapid 3-month growth you are looking for. Active listening requires your full, undivided attention. You need to treat it like a serious workout. Sit down, physically put on your headphones to block out distractions, and focus completely. The source suggests actively interrogating the material by asking yourself questions while you listen. What is the main topic? What is the speaker's actual underlying opinion on this topic? What specific examples did they just give to support their argument?
I love that approach. You are essentially demanding engagement from your own brain rather than just letting the sound wash over you. Now, as we move into the actual substance of what we're listening to, we have to talk about the mechanics of real spoken English. Here's where it gets really interesting, because we have to address tip 6, which is connected speech. The source points out a somewhat harsh reality that textbooks often ignore. People simply do not speak like dictionary entries. They just don't.
No, they absolutely do not.
In the real world, words constantly crash into each other. The guy gives some great examples of this. People don't carefully and crisply enunciate want to. They say wanna. They don't say going to. They say gonna. They don't ask did you. They ask did ya.
And this isn't native speakers just being lazy. It's a linguistic concept known as the economy of effort. The human mouth physically cuts corners to communicate faster and more efficiently. But this raises a major issue with how we typically study languages. If you spend all your time studying pristine, isolated dictionary pronunciation where every consonant is perfectly articulated, the real world is inevitably going to sound like chaos to you.
Just like my barista in London.
Exactly like your barista. Because in reality, native speakers drop consonants entirely. They link the end of one word to the vowel at the beginning of the next, and they compress entire multi-word phrases into single fluid sounds. You have to actively train your ear to recognize those blended acoustic sounds rather than the separate, grammatically correct written words you expect to hear in your head.
So if we know native speakers are going to smash their words together for the sake of efficiency, how do we actually train our brains to untangle that audio? The source suggests a really clever workflow for this in tip 5, utilizing transcripts. And it's not just reading along while you listen. Here's the process. First, you listen to a short piece of audio once or twice, using that active, fully focused listening we just talked about. Then you stop the audio and you read the transcript to spot all the connected speech and contractions you missed.
You find the gaps.
Right. You literally look at the paper and realize, oh, that completely garbled, bizarre sound I couldn't understand was actually the words should have been squished together. But here's the most crucial part of the technique. After you read it and identify the gap, you have to put the transcript away out of sight and listen to the audio again without reading. You have to force your brain to map the blended, messy sound you are hearing to the correct formal spelling in your head.
It is a very deliberate, conscious process of mapping sound to meaning. You are essentially teaching your auditory cortex to decode the real-world algorithm of spoken English. And to accelerate that mapping process, the source introduces a technique in tip 7 called shadowing.
Shadowing is amazing.
It is an incredibly powerful tool. It is essentially an exercise in vocal mimicry. You take a short sentence of audio, maybe just 4 or 5 seconds long. You play it, you immediately pause it, and then you repeat it out loud exactly like the speaker. You aren't just reading the sentence in your own voice. You are meticulously copying the rhythm, the speed, the rise and fall of their tone, and exactly how they blended those specific words together.
You copy the entire performance.
Exactly. And the underlying mechanism here is fascinating from a neuroplasticity standpoint. Your listening skills actually improve much faster when the physical act of speaking is involved. You are tying your auditory cortex and your motor cortex together, training your ears and your mouth simultaneously, which deeply reinforces the neural pathways for those specific sound patterns.
It's almost like you are reverse engineering the native speaker's mouth movements. You're physically feeling how dishu turns into didja in your own jaw and tongue. Okay, so shadowing helps us map our ears to our own mouths. But what happens when we step out of our carefully curated educational podcasts and encounter someone whose mouth moves completely differently? The source highlights tip 9, which tackles something that terrifies a lot of learners: accents. We're talking about the absolute necessity of mixing up the different accents you listen to, deliberately seeking out British, American, Australian, Canadian, Scottish, you name it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of cognitive adaptability, sticking to just one single comfortable accent makes your brain incredibly rigid. You get highly optimized for one specific set of vowel sounds and one particular rhythm. Then the moment you hear someone from a different region say, a thick regional Australian accent, that wall of noise we talked about at the beginning comes right back. The pattern recognition algorithms in your brain get completely thrown off.
Because it doesn't fit the one template you built.
Right. The source is very clear on this point. At first, listening to a new, unfamiliar accent is going to feel frustrating. It will feel like taking a step backward. But that initial difficulty is actually a highly productive state for your brain. Difficulty equals growth. By forcing your brain to decode entirely different pronunciations of the same underlying language, you are dramatically increasing your cognitive flexibility. You are teaching your brain to rely on broader acoustic patterns and context clues rather than relying on highly specific, narrow vowel sounds.
So, what does this all mean? We have covered some serious ground today, moving from cognitive bottlenecks to shadowing exercises. So let's recap your new listening mastery toolkit. Number 1. Let go of perfection. Trust your brain's inference skills and don't try to translate every single word. Number 2, embrace the 20 to 30-minute daily gym habit. Consistency always wins over intensity. Number 3, use progressive overload by starting with slow, clear audio and building your way up. Number 4, repeat the same audio multiple times for general meaning, for detail, and for pronunciation. Number 5, use transcripts to map out those tricky blended words, but make sure you listen again without the text. Number 6, actively study the economy of effort and connected speech, those wanas and gonas. Number 7, practice shadowing to connect your ears to your mouth's motor skills. Number 8, sit down and actively interrogate the audio. No more treating English like a background soundtrack. Number 9, bravely mix up those accents to build extreme brain flexibility. And finally, number 10, be patient with your own neuroplasticity.
I think the most important takeaway from our source material today is its ultimate comforting message. You need to remember that English or any language is not about perfection. It has never been about perfection. It is entirely about human connection, understanding, and communication. If you follow these practical steps, if you just keep showing up for your daily workout and keep exposing yourself to the messy reality of the spoken language, the pattern recognition in your brain will inevitably become automatic. The language will genuinely start to slow down for you. And most importantly, listening to fast, natural English simply will not feel scary anymore. You have all the cognitive tools you need to bridge that gap.
I will leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over. If our brains are this incredibly adaptable at finding hidden patterns in fast, messy spoken language, literally rewiring our auditory processing just by letting go of the rigid textbook rules and fully embracing the chaos, what other complex life skills could you master simply by stepping away from the instruction manual and immersing yourself in the messy reality of the real world? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. Now, no more procrastinating. Go put on your headphones, find a short audio clip, and start your 20 minutes of practice right now. We'll catch you next time.